The early morning sun had barely peeked over the mountain peaks when Staff Sergeant James Cooper pulled his weathered blue Jeep into the empty parking lot of Black Rock Wilderness Trail. The gravel crunched under his tires as he parked, breaking the pristine morning silence. At 6:30 a.m., he was usually the first visitor to arrive at the trail, just the way he liked it. Cooper, a 32-year-old Special Forces veteran, had recently returned from his third deployment in Afghanistan 3 months ago. The transition back to civilian life hadn't been easy. While other veterans sought comfort in support groups or medication, Cooper found his peace in these solitary morning hikes. There was something about the crisp mountain air and the sound of leaves rustling in the wind that helped quiet the memories that often kept him awake at night. As he stepped out of his Jeep, Cooper automatically scanned his surroundings, a habit drilled into him during his 12 years of military service. The parking lot was designed to hold 20 vehicles, with 3 spots reserved for handicap parking near the trailhead. His trained eyes noticed fresh tire marks in the gravel, which seemed odd given the empty lot. The morning dew hadn't settled on these tracks, meaning they were very recent. Cooper reached into his back seat and pulled out his well-worn hiking backpack. Everything inside was meticulously organized: a first aid kit, 2 liters of water, trail mix, a flashlight, and basic survival gear. He might have left the military, but their motto of "always be prepared" had stuck with him. As he adjusted the straps of his backpack, the sleeve of his gray t-shirt lifted slightly, revealing a small portion of the scar on his right bicep, a souvenir from his second tour. The morning was cooler than usual for early June, and a light mist hung in the air, creating a mysterious atmosphere around the dense pine trees that marked the trail's entrance. Cooper took a deep breath, enjoying the smell of wet earth and pine needles. These peaceful moments were what he lived for now. As he walked toward the trailhead, something caught his attention. There, carelessly parked across all 3 handicapped spots, were 3 motorcycles. They weren't the typical touring bikes he often saw on the mountain roads. These were older models, poorly maintained, with custom paint jobs that had seen better days. One bike had a chain with a heavy padlock wrapped around its front wheel, a clear sign its owner expected to be gone for a while. Cooper frowned as he examined the bikes more closely. His experience had taught him that small details often told bigger stories. The bike's positioning showed a complete disregard for rules and other people's needs. The scrapes on their sides and the worn-out tires suggested rough handling. But what really caught his attention were the patches scattered across the leather jackets thrown over the handlebars. They weren't the standardized patches of legitimate motorcycle clubs. These were crude, homemade versions often used by troublemakers trying to intimidate others. Standing at the trailhead information board, Cooper pulled out his phone and quickly photographed the motorcycles. Years of service had taught him to document suspicious situations. He noted the time, 6:43 a.m., in his mind. The trail map showed it was a 6-mile hike to Eagles Peak, his usual destination. Under normal circumstances, he'd meet no more than 2 or 3 other hikers this early in the morning. Before starting his hike, Cooper did what he always did. He stretched his muscles and checked his boots one last time. As he tightened his laces, he could hear his old drill sergeant's voice. "Your feet are your foundation, soldier. Take care of them, and they'll take care of you." Some habits never changed, and he was grateful for that. The first quarter-mile of the trail was wide and well-maintained, designed to give hikers a gentle start before the more challenging sections began. As Cooper started his hike, the gravel path crunching softly under his boots, he couldn't shake an uneasy feeling about those motorcycles. In his experience, trouble often announced itself through small signs, and those bikes were waving red flags. Still, Cooper continued his hike at a steady pace. The morning birds were starting their daily chorus, and the rising sun was gradually burning away the morning mist. Whatever lay ahead on the trail, he was prepared to handle it. After all, he hadn't survived 3 tours in Special Forces by ignoring his instincts or backing down from challenges. 2 miles into his hike, Cooper paused near a small stream to take a sip of water. The trail had become steeper, winding through dense forest with occasional breaks that offered breathtaking views of the valley below. The peaceful morning silence was suddenly broken by the sound of rapid footsteps and heavy breathing coming from around the bend ahead. An elderly couple appeared on the trail, moving much faster than people their age typically would. The man, who appeared to be in his mid-60s, was practically pulling his wife by the hand. Their faces were flushed, and both showed signs of distress. The woman's sun hat was askew, and the man's glasses sat crooked on his nose. "You might want to turn back, young man," the elderly gentleman called out between deep breaths as they approached Cooper. His wife nodded vigorously, clutching her small floral backpack tightly against her chest. Cooper noticed her hands were trembling. "Is everything all right?" Cooper asked, his military training kicking in as he assessed their condition. He pulled out his water bottle, offering it to the couple. The woman accepted it gratefully, taking small sips while her husband explained their situation. "There's a group of troublemakers up ahead," the man said, his voice still shaky. He introduced himself as George Thompson and his wife as Martha. They were regular hikers on this trail, coming out every Saturday morning for the past 5 years, but today was different. "3 men on the narrow passage near Thunder Rock," Martha added, returning Cooper's water bottle. "They're demanding money from hikers to pass through. They took $40 from the young family ahead of us." Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke. Cooper's jaw tightened as he listened. Thunder Rock was a well-known landmark about a mile ahead, where the trail narrowed significantly with a steep drop on one side. It was the perfect spot for an ambush, isolated, with limited escape routes. "Did they hurt anyone?" Cooper asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Years of handling crisis situations had taught him to gather information methodically. "Not physically," George replied, adjusting his glasses, "but they were very threatening. One of them had a knife on his belt, making sure everyone could see it. They're wearing those leather vests with patches, trying to look like real bikers." He shook his head disapprovingly. Martha touched Cooper's arm gently. "Please, young man, just turn back. We've already called the park rangers from the emergency phone at the 2-mile marker, but they said it might take an hour to get here. Those men." She paused, looking worried. They seemed high on something. Their eyes weren't right. Cooper nodded understanding, but he had no intention of turning back. His mind was already mapping out the situation, calculating distances and options. The couple's description matched what he had suspected when he saw those motorcycles in the parking lot. "How many other hikers are up there?" Cooper asked, pulling out his phone to check the time. It was just past 8 a.m. "We saw a family with 2 small children about 15 minutes ahead of us," George answered. "They paid the toll and hurried past. There might be others coming from the upper trail, but we didn't see anyone else." Cooper reached into his backpack and pulled out a granola bar, offering it to the couple. They had clearly exhausted themselves in their hasty retreat. As they ate, he asked them for more details about the bikers, their approximate ages, build, and any distinguishing features they could remember. The leader, the one with the knife, had a scorpion tattoo on his neck, Martha recalled. He kept calling himself Slash and laughing about it. The other 2 seemed to follow his lead. After ensuring the couple had caught their breath and were steady enough to continue their descent, Cooper gave them his phone number. "When you reach the parking lot, please call me if the rangers arrive. Otherwise, I'd appreciate it if you could wait there and point them in the right direction when they show up." George and Martha nodded, genuine concern showing in their eyes. "Be careful, young man," George said. "Sometimes it's better to just walk away." Cooper watched as the elderly couple made their way down the trail. Once they were out of sight, his expression hardened. He adjusted his backpack, took one more sip of water, and started moving up the trail at a steady pace. Walking away had never been his style, especially when others needed help. As Cooper approached Thunder Rock, the trail grew narrower, with steep cliffs rising on one side and a sharp drop-off on the other. The morning sun now hung higher in the sky, casting dappled shadows through the tree canopy. He could hear loud, rough laughter echoing off the rock faces ahead, mixed with the sound of glass bottles clinking together. Rounding the final bend before Thunder Rock, Cooper saw them. 3 men lounged across the narrow pathway, making it impossible for anyone to pass without getting close to them. Empty beer bottles lay scattered around their feet, and the sharp smell of marijuana hung in the air. They looked exactly as the elderly couple had described them, wannabe bikers trying too hard to appear threatening. The leader, who Cooper instantly identified as Slash by the scorpion tattoo on his neck, sat on a large boulder. He was a heavy-set man in his late 30s, wearing a leather vest covered in fake motorcycle club patches. A hunting knife hung prominently on his belt, positioned to intimidate rather than for practical use. His 2 companions were younger, probably in their mid-20s, both lanky and fidgety with the telltale signs of drug use evident in their jerky movements. Cooper maintained a steady pace as he approached, his military training allowing him to analyze every detail while appearing casual. The younger bikers had positioned themselves on either side of the trail, a basic flanking setup that might work on scared hikers but made Cooper almost want to smile at its amateurish nature. Well, what do we have here? Slash called out, his voice carrying a mocking tone. He stood up, deliberately showing off his full height and bulk. Looks like another customer for our toll booth. His companions snickered on cue, like extras in a bad movie. Cooper stopped about 10 feet away from them, close enough to engage but far enough to maintain a tactical advantage. His stance was relaxed but ready, a posture that had served him well in countless dangerous situations overseas. "I heard about your toll booth from some folks down the trail," Cooper said calmly, his voice carrying a natural authority that made all three men focus on him. "They also mentioned you've been harassing families and elderly couples." Slash's face darkened at Cooper's direct approach. He wasn't used to people talking back to him. "Listen here, nature boy," he growled, taking a step forward. "The toll is $50. Pay up or turn around. Those are your only options." The two younger bikers moved closer, trying to look menacing. One of them, wearing a dirty denim jacket with crude skull patches, cracked his knuckles dramatically. The other, sporting a bandana and multiple face piercings, kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, his eyes darting around nervously. "Actually, I have a third option to suggest," Cooper replied, his voice remaining steady. "Pack up your garbage, get on your bikes, and leave the trail before the Rangers arrive. They're already on their way." This caused a moment of uncertainty among the three men. The nervous one with the bandana glanced quickly at Slash, but their leader wasn't about to back down in front of his followers. "You got a big mouth for a guy outnumbered 3-1, Slash snarled, his hand moving to rest on his knife handle. "Maybe we need to teach you some respect before we take your money." Cooper sighed internally. He'd seen this behavior countless times, bullies who mistook kindness for weakness, who only understood one language. He decided to give them one last chance. "I'm a Special Forces veteran," he stated matter-of-factly. "I'd strongly advise against what you're thinking about doing." This declaration was met with mocking laughter from all three men. Slash took another step forward, now only a few feet from Cooper. "Special Forces? Right, and I'm Santa Claus," he sneered. "Let's see how special you are when." The situation escalated quickly as Slash reached out to shove Cooper's shoulder. It was meant to be intimidating, a prelude to violence that had probably worked hundreds of times before on frightened hikers. Instead, his hand found empty air as Cooper shifted slightly to the side. In that moment, looking into Cooper's eyes, Slash saw something that made him hesitate: the calm, focused gaze of someone who had faced far worse threats than three troublemakers on a hiking trail. But it was too late to back down now, and pride pushed him forward toward what would prove to be a very costly mistake. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife as Slash recovered from his failed attempt to shove Cooper. The morning birds had gone silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what would happen next. A cool breeze whistled through the narrow pass, rustling the empty beer cans at their feet. "You moved pretty quick for a hiker," Slash growled, trying to mask his surprise with aggression. His two companions spread out wider, creating what they thought was a tactical advantage. The nervous one with the bandana had pulled out a switchblade, while the one in the denim jacket picked up a thick branch from the ground. Cooper's mind automatically catalogued every detail of the situation: the loose rocks under their feet, the steep drop-off to their left, the way Slash's hand kept twitching toward his hunting knife. He had been in far worse situations during his deployments, but he had hoped to avoid violence on what was supposed to be a peaceful morning hike. "Last chance," Cooper said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "Walk away now, and we can all forget this happened." He maintained eye contact with Slash, knowing the leader was the key to defusing the situation. But he could also see the telltale signs of wounded pride and drug-fueled aggression in the man's bloodshot eyes. Slash spat on the ground near Cooper's boots. "You know what? I don't like your attitude." He pulled out his hunting knife, trying to look intimidating as he waved it through the air. "Special Forces? Let's see how special you are when you're bleeding out on this trail." The younger bikers laughed nervously, but Cooper noticed they were both keeping their distance. They were used to easy targets: families, elderly couples, lone hikers who would hand over their money without a fight. This was different, and somewhere in their drug-addled minds, they knew it. "I've spent 12 years in combat zones," Cooper stated calmly, not moving from his position. "I've faced insurgents, terrorists, and warlords. Do you really want to find out what that kind of experience means?" His words carried no bravado, just simple fact. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across Slash's face. Something in Cooper's steady gaze and calm demeanor was setting off warning bells in his head. But the combination of drugs, alcohol, and an audience pushed him forward. "Get him!" Slash barked at his companions. The nervous one hesitated, but the guy in the denim jacket moved forward, swinging his branch like a baseball bat. Cooper didn't move until the last possible second. When he did, it was with a fluid grace that came from years of combat training. The branch whooshed through empty air as Cooper simply wasn't there anymore. In the same motion, he grabbed the attacker's wrist and applied precise pressure. The branch clattered to the ground as the young biker found himself face down on the trail, his arm locked behind his back in a hold that sent waves of pain shooting through his shoulder. "Stay down," Cooper commanded, his voice still eerily calm. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to." The scene froze for a moment. Slash stood with his knife held out, suddenly looking less certain. The nervous one with the bandana had backed up several steps, his switchblade shaking in his hand. Their tough guy facade was cracking in the face of real capability. "You're making a big mistake," Slash said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Nobody messes with us on this trail." Cooper applied slightly more pressure to his hold, causing the pinned biker to whimper. "Actually, you're the ones making the mistake. I can see at least 3 felonies here: assault with a deadly weapon, extortion, and criminal threatening. That's before we get to the drug possession charges." A bead of sweat rolled down Slash's temple despite the cool morning air. His eyes darted between Cooper, his pinned friend, and the trail behind them. The situation had spiraled far beyond what he had expected, and for the first time that morning, real fear began to creep into his expression. But pride and drugs were a dangerous combination, and Slash had spent too many years building his reputation as a tough guy to back down now. With a roar of rage, he charged forward, his knife leading the way, and sealed his fate in doing so. Time seemed to slow down as Slash charged forward with his hunting knife. To the untrained eye, it might have looked dangerous, but Cooper saw it as what it was: an amateur attack fueled by rage and impaired judgment. In the split second before impact, Cooper's military training took over completely. Still maintaining the arm lock on the first biker, Cooper pivoted smoothly. His movement was so fluid that Slash's knife thrust met nothing but air. The momentum carried the larger man forward, and Cooper used this to his advantage. With precise timing, he released his first captive and grabbed Slash's knife arm at the wrist, applying a technique he had practiced thousands of times. There was a sharp cry of pain as the hunting knife fell from Slash's grasp, clattering against the rocks. Before anyone could blink, Slash found himself flying through the air. He landed hard on his back, the impact forcing the air from his lungs with a loud whoosh. The self-proclaimed tough guy lay there gasping like a fish out of water. The nervous biker with the bandana finally found his courage, or perhaps his desperation. He rushed forward with his switchblade, screaming what he probably thought was a war cry. Cooper almost felt sorry for him. Almost. In one continuous motion, Cooper sidestepped the wild attack, grabbed the young man's wrist, and applied pressure to a specific nerve point. The switchblade dropped instantly, and the biker's scream changed from aggressive to painful. Within seconds, he joined Slash on the ground, face down with his arms secured behind his back. The first biker, who had just started to get up, took one look at his fallen companions and made a decision. He turned to run, directly into a tree root. He stumbled and fell, hitting his head hard enough to stun himself. Cooper couldn't help but shake his head at the almost comical scene. "Stay down, all of you," Cooper commanded, his voice carrying the kind of authority that demanded immediate compliance. "The only reason you're not seriously hurt is that I'm choosing not to hurt you." Slash, still struggling to catch his breath, tried to roll over. Cooper placed his boot firmly but carefully on the man's chest. "I said, stay down. Don't make me say it again." The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. The only sounds now were the heavy breathing of the three bikers and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Empty beer cans rolled across the trail in the morning breeze, their hollow rattling adding a strange soundtrack to the scene. Cooper quickly assessed the situation. The nervous biker was whimpering, no longer a threat. The first attacker was sitting up slowly, holding his head and looking dazed. Slash had stopped struggling, finally seeming to understand the gravity of his situation. Reaching into his backpack while maintaining his position, Cooper pulled out several zip ties he carried as part of his hiking gear. Years of experience had taught him to always be prepared. One by one, he secured each biker's hands behind their backs, using his training to ensure the restraints were secure but not cutting off circulation. "The Rangers will be here soon," Cooper informed them as he worked. "I suggest you start thinking about how you want to explain all this. The drugs, the weapons, the extortion. It's not going to look good." Slash, now sitting up against a rock with his hands secured, finally found his voice. "You can't do this to us," he protested, but his tough guy act had evaporated. "We have rights." "Yes, you do," Cooper agreed calmly, collecting the dropped weapons and placing them well out of reach. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." The nervous biker started crying, mumbling something about not wanting to go back to jail. The one who had hit his head was still looking around in confusion. Slash just sat there, his face a mixture of anger and fear as the reality of his situation sank in. Cooper checked his phone. Only 15 minutes had passed since his encounter with the elderly couple. He could hear distant voices coming up the trail, probably the Rangers responding to the earlier call. The morning's excitement was almost over, but somehow he knew his peaceful hiking routine would never be quite the same again. The sound of approaching footsteps and radio chatter grew louder as two park rangers emerged around the bend of the trail. They stopped momentarily, taking in the unusual scene before them. Three zip-tied men sitting on the ground, surrounded by scattered beer cans and dropped weapons, while a calm, athletic man in hiking gear stood watch over them. "Special Forces?" the senior ranger asked, noticing Cooper's controlled posture and the professional way he had secured the situation. His nameplate read Roberts, and his hand rested casually on his service weapon. "Yes, sir." Staff Sergeant James Cooper. Cooper responded, showing his military ID. These three were operating an illegal toll booth, threatening hikers with weapons and demanding money to pass. Ranger Roberts nodded, already pulling out his radio to call for backup. His younger partner, Ranger Martinez, began taking photographs of the scene, including the scattered weapons and drug paraphernalia. "We got a call from an elderly couple about 30 minutes ago," Roberts explained while checking the zip ties on the suspects. "Said something about bikers causing trouble. Guess they understated the situation a bit." The nervous biker was still sniffling, while Slash had fallen into a brooding silence. The third one had finally stopped looking dazed and was now staring at his boots, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Found something interesting," Ranger Martinez called out, holding up a backpack she had discovered hidden behind some rocks. Inside were several wallets and cell phones, obviously taken from other hikers. She pulled out one wallet and checked the ID. "This matches the description of items reported stolen at Pinecrest Trail last weekend." Slash's face paled noticeably. Cooper could tell this wasn't the first time these three had pulled this scheme, but it was definitely their last. More rangers arrived, along with two local police officers who had been called in for backup. The scene quickly transformed into a busy investigation site. Evidence was photographed and collected, statements were taken, and the three bikers were properly handcuffed and read their rights. "You handled this perfectly," Ranger Roberts told Cooper as they watched the police load the suspects into their vehicles. "Most people would have either gotten hurt trying to be a hero or just turned around and left the problem for someone else." Cooper shrugged modestly. "Just happened to be the right person in the right place. Those three weren't exactly professionals." A young family appeared on the trail, the same ones the elderly couple had mentioned earlier. Their faces lit up with relief when they saw the police cars at the trailhead below. The father quickly approached the Rangers, explaining how they had been forced to pay a toll earlier that morning. "Sir," the father said, turning to Cooper after giving his statement, "the couple at the bottom of the trail told us what you did. Thank you. My kids were terrified, and I felt helpless." He extended his hand, which Cooper shook firmly. Ranger Martinez returned with more news. We just got word from the station. These guys are wanted in 3 counties for similar incidents. They've been terrorizing hiking trails across the state for the past 2 months. As the morning progressed, more hikers came forward with stories and identified their stolen belongings from the backpack. George and Martha, the elderly couple from earlier, had waited at the trailhead and were now giving their official statements to the police. Cooper spent the next hour helping the Rangers document the scene and providing a detailed statement of the incident. His military background and clear account of the events made the paperwork surprisingly straightforward. "We could use more people like you have here," Ranger Roberts commented as they finished up the paperwork. "Ever consider volunteering as a trail guardian? It's a program we're trying to start up. Having experienced hikers help keep our trails safe." Cooper looked up at the clear blue sky, thinking about how his peaceful morning hike had turned into something much more meaningful. "You know what? That actually sounds like a good idea." As the last police car pulled away and the Rangers began clearing the scene, Cooper checked his watch. It was barely noon. The trail ahead was clear now, inviting him to continue his hike, but somehow the day's events had already given him what he came looking for: a sense of purpose and the satisfaction of helping others. A hawk soared overhead, its cry echoing through the valley as peace returned to Thunder Rock. The morning's excitement was over, but its impact would be felt on these trails for a long time to come. The local police station buzzed with activity as officers processed the 3 bikers. Detective Sarah Chen sat across from Cooper in the interview room, reviewing his statement one final time. The walls were covered with wanted posters, and the afternoon sun streamed through the blinds, creating strips of light across the metal table. "This is quite impressive, Staff Sergeant Cooper," Detective Chen said, flipping through the growing case file. "Those 3 have been on our radar for months. We've had reports from 12 different hiking trails across 3 counties, but they always disappeared before we could catch them." Cooper sipped the coffee one of the officers had brought him. It wasn't great, but he'd had worse during his deployments. "They weren't very sophisticated," he commented. "Just bullies picking on people they thought wouldn't fight back." The detective nodded, pulling out a stack of photographs. "We've recovered 28 stolen wallets, 15 cell phones, and various other personal items from their motorcycles and apartments." The search warrant turned up quite a collection. She spread the photos across the table, showing bags of evidence being removed from a run-down apartment complex. Through the interview room's window, Cooper could see Slash being led to a holding cell. The scorpion tattoo on his neck was partially covered by bandages from where he'd scraped himself during his fall. His tough guy swagger was completely gone now, replaced by the slumped shoulders of someone facing serious jail time. "The district attorney is pressing multiple charges," Detective Chen continued. "Armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, criminal threatening, drug possession, and that's just the beginning. With all the victims coming forward, they're looking at significant prison time." As if on cue, a young officer knocked and entered the room. "Sorry to interrupt, Detective. We got more victims arriving to identify their stolen property." The story's spreading on local hiking forums, and people are coming in from all over the state. The news had indeed traveled fast. Local hiking groups on social media were buzzing with the story, and the original post by George and Martha had gone viral in the outdoor community. People were sharing their own encounters with the 3 bikers, and messages of gratitude for Cooper's intervention were pouring in. Detective Chen closed her notebook and stood up. "Well, Staff Sergeant, I think we have everything we need. But before you go, the chief wants to speak with you." Cooper was led to the chief's office, where Chief Michael Rodriguez, a veteran himself, was waiting. The office walls were decorated with service medals and community service awards. A local news channel played silently on a small TV in the corner, showing footage of the trail and interviews with relieved hikers. "Staff Sergeant Cooper," the chief greeted him warmly, gesturing to a chair. "I understand we have you to thank for cleaning up our trails. Those 3 have been a thorn in our side for quite a while." Cooper sat down, noticing the chief's Marine Corps photo on the wall. "Just doing what needed to be done, sir." "Well, the Park Service is very interested in your background," the chief continued. "They've been trying to establish a trail safety program for months now, and they think you'd be perfect to help develop it." Before Cooper could respond, there was another knock at the door. A Parks Department official entered, carrying a folder and wearing an eager expression. "Staff Sergeant Cooper, I'm glad I caught you. We'd like to offer you a position as our Trail Safety Program Coordinator. The offer caught Cooper by surprise. He had been struggling to find his place in civilian life, and here was an opportunity that seemed to fit perfectly. The job would involve training volunteer trail guardians, coordinating with law enforcement, and helping maintain safety on the hiking trails he had grown to love. The pay's not military grade, the park's official admitted, but it comes with full benefits and the chance to make a real difference in our community. Cooper looked at the job description, thinking about how this morning's hike had led to something so unexpected. His military training had taught him to recognize opportunities when they appeared, and this one felt right. As the sun began to set outside the police station, Cooper shook hands with the chief and the park's official, accepting the position. Walking to his jeep, he noticed George and Martha leaving the station after identifying their stolen cash. They waved enthusiastically, and Cooper couldn't help but smile. What had started as a simple morning hike had turned into the beginning of a new chapter in his life. 6 months had passed since the incident at Thunder Rock, and the changes were remarkable. The community center's main hall was packed with eager faces as Cooper stood at the front, preparing to start another self-defense class for hikers. The evening sun streamed through the high windows, illuminating the exercise mats spread across the floor. Remember, Cooper addressed the group of 30 participants, ranging from teenagers to seniors. The best self-defense is awareness and prevention. Today, we'll learn how to spot potential threats and avoid dangerous situations on the trails. In the front row, George and Martha sat with notepads ready. They had become regular attendees at Cooper's classes and unofficial ambassadors for the Trail Safety Program. Their story about that fateful morning had inspired many others to join the initiative. The local newspaper had run a feature story about the program's success. Since its implementation, trail-related incidents had dropped by 70%. The article sat framed on the community center's wall, alongside photos of the first graduating class of volunteer trail guardians. Staff Sergeant Cooper, a young hiker, raised his hand. "Is it true that you're expanding the program to other counties?" Cooper nodded, taking a sip from his water bottle. "Starting next month, we'll be training guardians for 5 more counties. The success we've had here has caught the attention of park services across the state." The program had indeed grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as basic safety classes had evolved into a comprehensive system of trail protection. Volunteer guardians now patrol popular hiking routes. Emergency call boxes had been installed at strategic points, and a mobile app helped hikers report suspicious activity instantly. "Today's lesson is special," Cooper announced, gesturing to a familiar face entering the room. Ranger Roberts stepped forward, now the lead coordinator between law enforcement and the Trail Safety Program. "We've got good news to share," Roberts said, scanning the attentive faces. "Yesterday, we received final confirmation that our Trail Safety Program is being adopted as a model for national parks across the country. Staff Sergeant Cooper's training methods will be implemented in parks from Yellowstone to the Smoky Mountains." Applause filled the room. Cooper felt a sense of pride, not for himself, but for what the community had accomplished together. The incident with the 3 bikers had been a catalyst for positive change that nobody could have predicted. As if reading his thoughts, Roberts added, "And for those wondering about our 3 troublemakers from Thunder Rock, they've been sentenced. Slash got 8 years, and his companions each received 5. More importantly, their story has deterred other potential troublemakers from targeting our trails." The class proceeded with Cooper demonstrating basic self-defense techniques. He showed them how to stand, how to be aware of their surroundings, and how to use their voice as a first line of defense. The participants practiced in pairs, their movements becoming more confident with each repetition. During a break, Martha approached Cooper with a plate of her famous trail mix cookies. She brought them to every class. "You know, James," she said, using his first name as she'd earned the right to do, "that morning changed more than just the trails. It changed all of us." Cooper looked around the room. He saw the teenage girl who used to be afraid to hike alone now confidently teaching stance techniques to a new participant. He watched the elderly man who had been robbed on a trail last year demonstrating the emergency alert system to others. These were more than students. They had become a community. As the class wrapped up, Cooper gathered everyone for a final word. "Remember, the trails belong to all of us. Our job isn't just to make them safer, It's to preserve them as places where anyone can find the peace and connection with nature that we all seek. The setting sun cast long shadows through the windows as people packed up their gear. Some stayed to chat, sharing stories of recent hikes and plans for weekend trail patrols. Cooper packed his teaching materials, thinking about how a single morning had led to all of this. Outside, the evening air was cool and crisp. Cooper could see Thunder Rock in the distance, its silhouette stark against the darkening sky. That trail would always hold special meaning for him now, not because of the confrontation, but because of the positive changes that had grown from it. Tomorrow morning, just like every morning since that day, he would hit the trails again. But now he wouldn't be hiking alone. He'd be part of something much bigger, a community dedicated to keeping the wilderness safe for everyone to enjoy.